all, welcome to the City of Tigard. I'm Heidi Lueb, I'm one of your counselors.
And Jason Snider, Mayor of Tigard.
We're excited to be here with you today to answer some of your questions and also talk about any issues that come up. We'd also like to talk a little bit about the police levy that we have referred to the ballot. It's on the May ballot that's going to come out. It's for 8 police officers, 1 school resource officer, and some de-escalation training. It's very much needed in our police department. A big question is, what does it cost? It's going to be 29 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, which is different than your real market value, which is going to cost the average homeowner about $81 a year. We know that it's a really difficult time right now, and it's a very difficult ask with everything that's going on. But we really feel that it's important to keep our community safe and to get out and ahead of the problems that we potentially see coming forward.
And we did put it on the ballot before this all happened, and we could not take it off the ballot by the time COVID-19 came upon us. So not a lot of choice there either.
Yeah, and I would say we certainly didn't see it coming.
No.
Yep, so we're here to answer any of your questions. Please type them into the comment box and we're going to get them. So the first thing we'd like to start out with is talking a little bit about how the mayor and I have been impacted by the COVID-19 situation. So I know in my house, it's been kind of difficult. I'm currently in between jobs, and my husband has been furloughed. So we are staying at home, along with our 2 dogs and our cat. One of the jokes is, I think that the dogs are actually coming out ahead. They're excited to have all of their owners home and their partners. I personally have 1 dog who's like Velcro and thinks this is incredible and like the greatest thing to ever happen to him. And I have another dog who's kind of more independent, and she keeps looking at us like, isn't it time for you to leave yet? I'd like to have it a little quiet.
A little too much Heidi time.
A little too much Heidi time. The cat, on the other hand, is a huge snuggler, so he's super excited about it. He's also really excited about the warm weather. He's been spending a lot of time in the backyard, sort of checking things out and taking a nap in the sun. But it's been a very difficult time for us. I know a lot of other community members are concerned. We're certainly concerned as well about how long this is going to last, how we're going to pay our bills, continuing to need to go out to get food and other supplies. It's just really stressful. And I think sometimes, we're trying to be upbeat, but certainly there's moments of depression and frustration and anxiety. And all we can do is continue to look to our leaders and continue to follow the medical advice. But lots of movies, TV, radio, listening to some podcasts, reading lots of books. And my husband and I played Halo the other day.
How'd that go?
Who's
better?
So it depends. We have a different skill set. As the mayor knows, my husband and I are actually very hyper-competitive people. We can't bowl together and we can't go mini-golfing because one of us is going to end up angry. So we like games like Halo and Rainbow Six and things like that where we can play cooperatively. So we're actually on the same team, not against each other.
Gotcha.
So it actually went pretty well.
My house, things are kind of busy. I've got 3 kids in 3 school-age children, and so between that and me working from home mostly, I work in healthcare, so there have been a few times when I've had to go into the office, but for the most part, we've been being encouraged to telecommute as much as possible, and so are most of the physicians that I work with and support. So I've been working from home a lot, and then also interspersing all of the duties of the mayor in between all that. And so it's been, for me, a really busy time, both trying to balance the crisis at work and the crisis at the city, and then trying to get all that done with 3 kids moving around the house at rapid pace, trying to learn and get their energy out, etc. It's just been a very challenging time, and I think for people are kind of mourning the fact that they didn't end up with a spring break, and now there's so much uncertainty about jobs and the economy in general. It's just a very unsettling time, and I think we all have to be doing the best to support each other during that very difficult time, and give people a little bit of grace too. My wife is certainly not used to being home all day, every day with me and 3 children. And so she's giving me some grace, and I'm giving her some. And I think that both in your family and in the community can go a long way.
I will say one of the things I've actually kind of enjoyed is when we have taken our dogs out to go on walks. I've never waved and said hi to so many community members. I think everyone's just excited to see each other and be outside, and I hope that that's something that continues afterwards, just a continual appreciation for each other and just a positive attitude that we can see each other and be outside.
So we have a question from Michelle about the Southwest Corridor Light Rail, and one of the comments that one of the Portland City Commissioners, Hardesty, had made about the impact on the light rail project. This is an interesting one. I have not heard more detail about her rationale for making that comment. She is not the commissioner that's assigned from the City of Portland for transportation or working with the light rail project directly. So I don't have direct insight on what's behind that. I can say that at the federal level, when we're talking about large infrastructure spending and looking for projects where we as a community or as a region and as a country can spur economic activity, building projects that are already in design is something that may actually make the federal funding easier, surprisingly enough, or may allow us to move some of the elements of the Southwest Corridor that maybe weren't going to be funded. It may allow us to include things in the project that would be really nice to have, but maybe not. They weren't going to end up being funded because of all the cost pressures on the project. So I think it's pretty early to know what the impact will be, but that's what I would share at this point. There's a question about the Tigard Street Trail. Let's see. From David. Let's see. I walk it daily, and twice now I've caught cars driving on it. Apparently some cars think the entrance at Tiedemann is a driveway to the museum. You need to add some bollards and signage. So that is some feedback that we'll give to staff and ask for follow-up on. I've been being pretty good at staying at home, so I have honestly not seen that there were cars on the Tigard Street Heritage Trail, but we will make sure staff make a note and get that followed up on. What other questions and thoughts do you have? Any questions about the police levy? I saw one from Kristen about what is our favorite place to get takeout in Tigard. Councilor Lueb, you want to comment on that?
There's so many good places. I think it would be hard to choose just one. I do want to say that I really appreciate that there's a way that our businesses can continue to stay open. That it's a really difficult time for a lot of companies and a lot of employees who are currently struggling to be able to have people and to keep their businesses open. And so this is a really great way for them to continue to work and keep open. So I'm trying to think of, we've had takeout from a couple of different places. What about you?
Well, certainly, I got some flack for not answering this question last week.
Did you?
So I did. I mostly from my wife. But, I think many of the downtown businesses are great choices. Many of them are open right now and serving takeout. I would encourage people to support our small business entrepreneurs that own restaurants and are trying to do what they can to serve their community. This is an opportunity for our community to come together.
Yeah. And I know recently D'Angelo's Catering is starting to do some of the take-home meals that you can order. And we're looking at doing that because sometimes, it's difficult when you're at home all of the time. There's kind of this joke about this run on toilet paper because everyone is stocking up. But when you're home all the time, you're using a whole lot more of that because you're going at home and you're eating at home and there's a lot of different things to do. So it's nice to have an option just to break it up and to not have to cook.
Lots of businesses are doing things different. I think Beach Hut Deli's now selling deli meat and vegetables, which they've never done before. So.
And I saw recently, I think you get a roll of toilet paper with a takeout order. Is that correct?
If so, I think
I saw that today.
Takeout
so if you're
nightly.
running low, go to Beach Hut.
So Carl has a question that's directed at me, but I think we can both answer. Mayor Snider, what are the lessons learned so far from the pandemic that impact the short and long-term operating plans for the city? That is a great question, and one that is going to be, I think it's a little early to know certainly what the long-term implications are. Certainly in the short term, we've really had to change the way that we're doing business, and being able to do much of our work virtually and keep the city open has been very positive. There are things that we just have not been able to do. One is operating the library with books being, in and out without a way to clean them has been a serious challenge, and so we've not been able to figure out how to do that differently in a safe way for our employees. But there's still so much that we can do virtually, and I think this is really challenging all of us to be creative during this time. But knowing exactly what the financial impacts are going to be to the city and to our community, it's very early to know that. It's going to depend on how long things have to stay the way that they are, how effective the federal stimulus packages are. I think all of that is quite unknown at this time, and just makes us all uneasy because there just aren't answers.
And I think that's one of the hardest things. We're going into our budget season for our next fiscal year, and it's certainly something that I think we're talking about, or at least I'm looking at, as far as the difficulties that are happening this year and what sort of projects are planned for next year that don't make sense. I don't think, we're going to go back to business as usual. I think business is going to change, and the way that the city works changes. And so it's something to keep an open mind and figure out the new normal and the new way that it's going to work. And I think our priority is just to look at what do the Tigard residents need and how can we best serve them now and in the longer term in light of everything that's happening.
Michelle Spencer had a great call out here. She is indicating, and for everyone in the Tigard community, that for veterans, the American Legion is serving takeout free lunch on Wednesdays and Fridays during the COVID pandemic. That is fabulous, and I appreciate you sharing that information to make sure that we can broadcast that to the broader community, and I applaud you. It looks like you are the service officer for that post 158, so I want to thank you for that and leading and leaning in to make sure that our veterans are taken care of. That's really critical.
Yeah, it's an important group that can sometimes slip through the cracks, especially now with the social distancing and maybe lack of the availability to get there or to get to the store. It's a group that, it's important to make sure it gets additional services.
There's a question up there about how residents can share comments on the budget and what is the timeline.
Well, I think that's still kind of up in the air as far as the timeline. We're held to make sure that we have our budget set by June 30th, right? That's the final day that we're able to have it certified. And so we sort of work backwards from that to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of meetings. Obviously right now it's a little difficult with the social distancing, and so we are trying to work with the governor and legislatures to figure out what are some ways that we can continue to hold our budget process and to make sure that there is adequate and ample community input to look at it, just to make sure that it's going along. But I don't know if, certainly it's up in the air. We don't have a whole lot of answers right now, but it's something that we're figuring out. For comments on the budget, you can reach out to us in many different ways. You can email us at council mail, which is available. I don't know the exact, is it council mail at Tiger Dash?
If you go to the city website and you're trying to send an email to the council or to a member of the council, it is the email address that comes up. So
okay, and we're going to share in the comments the best way to email that to us. So you can email us as a group. You can go ahead and email us individually. There's several of us who have Facebook pages that are open and available if you want to comment that way.
Yeah, we've already been having a lot of dialogue about the police levy over the last couple months on social media, and we're happy to continue engaging that way. We've provided a lot of answers when people have had questions about details about the levy. We've been able to respond to those and get people answers.
I think definitely one of the goals for this council is to get out in the community, and in this time it's very difficult, and so we've tried to go above and beyond to make sure that we're available for questions, and there's multiple different ways to contact us. So please reach out. We want to hear from you, and we want to talk to you about what your concerns are or things that you think are really, really important to continue to fund.
We have a question from Amber Clark about thoughts on keeping people off the school grounds in Cook Park.
Oh, it's a tough one.
The school grounds are closed entirely. I think the school district made that decision a couple weeks ago, and I think they really didn't have a lot of choice about that because they're not in a position with the kind of grounds crews that the city has to at least try to maintain their grounds, but still keep people off structures and off of basketball courts. So I understand why the school district did what they had to do. As far as how to keep people off of school grounds, our focus at this time is on trying to educate people. And so if there are people that you feel like you can safely communicate a concern with, that's certainly the best first step, because frankly education is helpful. People, if you're really concerned and you think it poses a major public health hazard, you can certainly call the non-emergency line of the police department, and if they're able, with everything else that's going on, they may be able to respond. You can do that anytime you have any concern. I would discourage people from calling 911 about people that are congregating unless there's some major public safety issue right in front of you.
I will say that I was actually at Cook Park yesterday. I don't live too far from it, and we went on an extra long walk with our dogs. And as we were walking down, we were actually surprised. I mean, the parking lot looked fairly full, which my husband and I were both a little weary about, especially with the distancing. Mm-hmm. But as we walked through, we were actually incredibly impressed. People were staying far away from each other. It looked like there wasn't any congregating. It was just households that were together. We walked through a couple of trails, and everyone was really good about staying away from each other and giving each other space, as well as saying hello. And we were very encouraged. We walked by the play areas, and the city of Tigard has done a really good job as far as wrapping them up and making sure that you can't access a lot of the different areas. So we were down there yesterday, and it was really busy, but I didn't happen to see anybody playing or doing anything that they shouldn't have. They were all really respectful.
We should probably mention now that we're making sure that we're maintaining our physical distance here. I'm hearing that we should start using the term physical distance instead of social distance to represent what we're really meaning, because we want people to still have social interaction, but not be physically next to each other. So that's a interesting little tidbit. But we had quite an interesting time trying to set this room up today to make sure that we could deliver this with two people and still maintain our physical distance.
Yes, without us being little ants on the screen.
So send us your questions. We are here for them.
Let's see, what's on the list? What is your favorite show to binge watch?
I answered that last week. Let's hear yours.
We've been going through some old and some new stuff. We just finished the series finale of Schitt's Creek, which I think is just a phenomenally entertaining show. Have you ever watched it, Mayor?
I have not, but I've wanted to.
I would highly encourage you to.
Part of my answer last week is that I haven't had a lot of time to be watching TV. I do a little bit, and it's usually Madam Secretary.
I love Madam Secretary is one of my all-time favorites. But Schitt's Creek is a really nice little just escape, just for entertainment, and watching the family grow and change is really great. We always have Parks and Rec on, just a constant loop. And we're also keeping up to date on the new Top Chef, which is coming out, and it's going to be playing tonight, so we will watch it tomorrow.
So is Parks and Rec, is that how you model your approach to city activities and city council?
Well, one of my favorite people ever is Ron Swanson.
Well,
I mean, I love Leslie Knope
as a role model. Or?
I mean, I just love who he is as a person. He just, he's got this tough guy exterior, but down in the end, he's this huge softie, and he really cares. But he doesn't want you to know he cares. He's kind of like my cat, right? Like, he's just sort of like, no, I'm not interested, but he certainly needs his people. But no, I love Ron Swanson.
Okay.
So that's really what I'm watching.
We have some new ones. Let's see. How are our first responders handling this pandemic? Are we properly staffed for the additional domestic or not? Let's see. Get this all the way open here. How are our first responders handling this pandemic? Are we properly staffed for the additional domestic or non-emergency calls? So this is a challenge. You've heard us talk. We even talked earlier in this live broadcast about the challenges our police department faces with staffing, and it is no different now. We don't have more police officers right now during the pandemic, and calls for service are up. I talked last week. I'll reemphasize it today that domestic violence calls are actually up a fair bit. Those take a lot of resources, and so. If I just answer the question, am I comfortable with our staffing? I wasn't comfortable with it before the pandemic because of the concerns that I've discussed multiple times. We can go through those. If people say they want to hear it again, I'm happy to do that. But no, we're not adequately staffed, and certainly not during a pandemic where we've got a bunch of people at home who are under more psychological and social stressors than they normally are. That's very challenging.
And I think it's a scary time for a lot of people where home isn't their safe place.
Right.
A lot of us feel very safe in our homes and being able to quarantine as we need to. It's kind of our cocoon, but it can be a really scary place when, either school or work was your safe place and you're no longer allowed to go there. But I would say, I know the stress in our house and our lives is definitely exponential, and it's a really stressful time, and tempers are running very short, and our officers are staying busy, and those are very difficult calls to handle. Also from an emotional level, police officers are people too, and so, they carry around the weight of these calls from call to call, and as the mayor said, we were lower than we'd like to be before this has happened, and it's certainly something that weighs heavily on our mind to make sure that our officers and our first responders are able to take care of themselves in order to take care of the community.
Got a question about what does a post-COVID Tigard look like? Councilor Lueb, you want to take that?
I think we sort of talked about it a little bit earlier. I think it looks different. I think, even just on a regional or national level, things are going to change. I know Dr. Fauci was saying today he hopes two things continue, that everybody knows how to wash their hands. The video for me that was super helpful was the guy with the gloves and the black paste or whatever on exactly how to wash your hands. He said he hopes we continue to wash them very vigorously.
That'll serve us well in the future.
It will. I mean, so now I kind of do it. Every time I do it, I'm thinking about, making sure that the color is all over my hands and the soap is. And the other thing he said is that he hopes handshaking stops. I think that was an interesting thing, just that's a frequent way that different things are spread. So I think those are some of the things that are certainly going to weigh heavily on our minds once we've learned truly firsthand how quickly things can spread and how things spread. But I think, it's going to be difficult to get everything started again. It's not going to be a light switch and all of a sudden, we're able to gather. And, my husband and I had an interesting conversation about college football today. What do we think it's going to look like? I mean, I'm a huge college football fan. And I honestly, I personally don't think that college football is going to look the same in the fall. I think, until we get some ways to really be able to handle this and some vaccines and things, life is going to continue to look different simply because of how quickly it's spread. But I think it's something that we're certainly looking at, and I'm looking to medical professionals and to the governor to see, how we are going to start to open things back up. But I don't think we're close to thinking about it quite yet. Oregon is doing a really great job at starting to flatten the curve. We're having less cases. While we're still having cases, it's starting to taper off. But we're not quite to the point, I think, where we can have that discussion of what it looks like. But I think it's a great question, and it's something we're certainly thinking about. I just don't think we have the answers quite yet.
So back to Dr. Fauci for a minute. What would he say if we were Italy? He'd probably be horrified that we kissed each other all the time, right? I mean, that would be worse than hand washing, probably.
I would assume it would be worse than hand washing, or the handshaking, yeah. Or we could do the elbow bumps or the foot thing. In Hawaii, hang loose.
So I have a question from Steve. Does the City Cares project really eliminate businesses that have had nearly 100% revenue loss because of the fact that they did over $500,000 in sales last year? I think that's what that means. Margins on food-related business at the national level are 3 to 5% profit. Does that seem like you care? My response to begin with on this is that we acknowledge and are aware that there is a huge need in our community, and for reasons that we already can't fund our own police department adequately. We had to be very creative about how we could fund, frankly, anything to support our business community. And when giving that consideration and trying to think about how we could make Tigard's very small amount of money go as far as we could, and also help have the biggest impact in our community, the conclusion that we had was that we needed to try to focus on assisting businesses that were going to be ineligible for federal relief, and that were most at risk because of that. And if a business is doing, just at a most basic level, if a business is doing $500,000 a year or more in revenue, having a $500 or $1,000 micro grant from the city is not going to change whether or not that it's not going to be a game changer as far as whether or not that business is going to survive or not. And so what I would share is that we really tried to be and that let me state that a little further. That type of business is going to need significant support from the federal government, and that is why there is a large amount of money invested in there's more than $2 trillion invested in the federal programs if you consider it in total, and that's really where businesses that have that kind of need are going to need to go. What we tried to do was thoughtfully figure out how we could have the biggest impact in Tigard with the very small resources that we had. And so that is how and why the Tigard Cares program was designed the way that it was. Let's see, we have a question from Rick. He's seen a couple temporary bathrooms outside around town in places that welcome our homeless friends. Was this a city-sponsored activity? And the answer is city or county or by individual location. So the city has supported multiple of those. We have bathrooms at the Tigard Library that our city funded. I believe we helped with the city helped with the one that's at Just Compassion as well at the Day Center and the Heritage Trail.
I would also say that this is a situation in which, in order to have bathrooms, there needs to be a place to adequately wash your hands and either sanitize or use soap to wash them. And it's a situation in which I think we would love to be providing more bathrooms around to our homeless population and our community members. But everyone has gotten these portable bathrooms in these wash stations. There just aren't any more available to be able to use. They're out. And so we were lucky, I think, when I was speaking to the city manager, we actually got a couple of the last few available in order to have them placed in Tigard. So I think it's something that, everyone is using.
Yeah, it's really important. I actually get, we have a homeless resident who has contacted me multiple times over the last few months on his cell phone, which he does have a cell phone, and he calls me with some regularity, and we were texting today, and he actually has been really helpful in sort of keeping me tuned into what the unique needs of the homeless are during this environment, during this pandemic, and what the environment is like for them. And the bathroom situation was one of the things that he raised right off the bat. He and one other homeless individual raised that to my attention pretty quickly when the library closed. And so we took swift action to try to address that. Steve has another question. I think this is a follow-up on the Tigard Cares program. In an effort to create transparency, who is getting the loans? I'm gonna assume that question is about the loans that the city of Tigard is involved in and not the federal ones, because I wouldn't know where to begin answering that one. But that program just opened and began taking applications. Our partners, the community development financial institutions, just started taking applications, so it's too early to be able to answer who is receiving them. But we do know that there are hundreds of firms in Tigard that meet that criteria and need and are requesting support.
Yeah, and the community partner we're working with is Craft 3 for the loan program. If it's a situation in which you'd like to apply for it, please contact us, and we can get you in contact with Lloyd Purdy, who's funneling that information to Craft 3 in order to make sure that you will qualify for the program.
So it looks like Rick thanks us for supporting the homeless population. Thank you, Rick, for that call out. Appreciate it. And we want to make sure that the people that are most vulnerable in our community, who already struggle through daily life, are they are clearly probably more, as much as we'd like to say we're impacted.
Very much impacted.
Think about not being able to find a place to go to the bathroom. That's where they're at, and so that's pretty different than where many other folks in the community are. And so we are trying to do our best to make sure that we do what we can to support them.
What about grants? That question is coming from Steve as well. That's a situation in which there's some criteria that needs to be met in order to receive those grants. I don't know if any grants have been awarded yet.
The organization that's helping to support that is just starting to sort through those as well. So I know that we had more requests than we'll even have funding for, just as far as the numbers go. So that's going to be challenging as well to sort through.
Yeah. So we don't have any information yet on who is receiving those, but it's something where, again, it's being filtered through Lloyd Purdy, who is making sure that the people and the businesses who are applying for the grants are meeting the criteria before they're going through the application process. We can... He's
actually trying to be, as he typically is, very service oriented, and making sure that he connects people with the right programs that they are eligible for.
Yeah, Lloyd's doing a great job, and he's staying very busy right now, and he's making a big impact on the business owners. So great job, Lloyd. Let's see.
You want to tackle what the most surprising thing that you've learned while serving on the council is?
I would say that I think One of the things that I was incredibly surprised and impressed and overwhelmed with is how many people in our community care and give of their time and their services and their expertise to really make our community better. The amount of people that I have met just through the different committees that I sit on and different programs that just talk about how they're doing has just been something that I think has been most impactful to me. I've loved living in Tigard since I moved here in 2016, but it was something where I didn't know how much Tigard residents cared until I got much more deeply involved, and it was just something that made me want to be so much better and work that much harder in order to help them get things done and get things moving along.
So what is the most surprising thing I've learned while serving on the city council?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Well, it has, and I have to be honest, I've answered this question a couple times over the last 6 or 7 years. It's things that I never thought about, actually. So one of them, and I guess I kind of knew that if you poured oil down the storm drain, that would end up in a river, right? Like that sort of, I had that connection. But how the storm, for example, this is just one example of a thing that was just blew my mind once I understood how exactly the stormwater system works in a city and why it has to exist, and really that development that creates impervious surfaces that the water can't go into requires that water's still coming, right? The water's coming no matter what. So you got to figure out how to deal with it and where it's going to go. And it also will always go to the lowest point. So it, there's just some basic principles and understanding the way that entire system operates was just really kind of, maybe shocking isn't the right word. I just had never given it a lot of thought. And doing it poorly is really dangerous. It creates landslides. We've got a few areas in Tigard where we have these, like the Grand Canyons of Tigard that are created by poorly designed stormwater from 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so that's just one. I'll just give you one sample there.
So, fun story. One of my favorite classes in high school was actually my high school chemistry class. And one of the things I loved most about it is actually when we took a tour to the water and sewer treatment plants. I just thought it was fascinating how much goes into our water, because I think a lot of us just sort of turn on the tap and it's there. And here in Tigard, we're lucky to have some really great water. And so we don't think about it, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. I was able to take a tour of the plant in Lake Oswego, and it's just fascinating the amount of science and chemistry that goes into it and all of the hard work just to make sure that everything is flowing. That's especially important in a time like these because we have to wash our hands and we need water for that.
Well, and think about what people would think if they turned the tap on and there was no water.
That would be very scary.
Well, this is one of the things I talk about with elementary school kids when I come and chat in their classrooms and they wonder what the city does. And things like that kind of blow their mind. So we had another question from Steve about the grant monies and clarifying whether or not they are from the city. Some of them are from this, or they are from the city, but they're being administered by a third party at our direction, is my understanding. And that is a third party who is used to administering these types of grants, loans, and other programs. I think MESO is the CDFI that is administering the grants, and then Craft 3 is administering the loans. Correct?
Yes. Yep. Those are the two that we have. So one of the next questions we have is, will there be another youth counselor next year? Yes, there will be. We're currently taking applications to fill the role that starts July 1st and will run until June 30th. And information's available on the website. We would love for you to apply, any high schoolers who are watching. Although if you watched Ben last night, he said that the high school population is actually on Instagram and not on Facebook.
This is Ben Bowman.
This is Ben Bowman, yeah. Yesterday he was talking about the governor's announcement.
One of our Tiger Tualatin School District school board members.
Yeah, so I think maybe we're a little out of the hip crowd right now, just posting to Facebook. But if you have a high schooler, we'd love to have their input. I think the youth voice is incredibly important to have at the table, and we'd love to have you come talk to us and let us know what's going on.
So we have a question about who gets the credit for the Save the Pipes, Don't Flush the Wipes
It's really good.
sign that I know there's one down on Hall, yeah. And so I'm going to, the answer I've been given is our Emergency Operations Center and our emergency management team, but I guarantee you that they were first notified of that problem by Clean Water Services, who manages our sewer systems, and likely our staff. In fact, I heard that there was an area near River Terrace that Clean Water Services had to clean flushable wipes out of 3 times in one day.
That's
in the same spot. So please don't flush flushable wipes. They're not flushable.
They're not flushable. There's a great picture out there somewhere on social media right now that actually has toilet paper and then flushable wipes and one other thing. And you can see that the toilet paper actually completely dissolves, but the flushable wipes don't actually dissolve. And so they travel through our pipes and get clogged and create a whole lot of problems. So if you're out of toilet paper and you're using those flushable wipes, please have a trash can close to you to be able to dispose of it there and not in the pipes.
So next question from Steve, back to the Tigard Cares program. No other cities, here's his question or statement, no other cities he knows of are administering grants through third parties. Why is Tigard? Interesting question, and one that a number of cities, including Hillsborough and Beaverton, were very quick to create a program, and then quickly had a program that was completely oversubscribed to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars. I think Tualatin went through this too. And I guess what I would say is that, again, we've tried to be very thoughtful about the program and make sure that it is funded in a way that will have the biggest impact in our community. We also know that from experience in a variety of places that we as the city are not good at certain things that we don't do very often. And I think we're already seeing the challenges that some of the other cities that, were out within a day or two with a program with a bunch of money are having trouble administering the programs. And we're choosing to use an organization to help administer the programs who's actually used to doing this kind of work.
Yeah, it's what they do. It's what they're built for. Administering this kind of program with the level of applications that are coming in are just not something that we're good at, and we don't have the infrastructure for it. So it's something that would end up costing the city more to administer than to be able to reach out to a third party and to create that kind of partnership. I think we were really thoughtful in not reinventing the wheel, but going to someone who already has that wheel going very well and very smoothly to be able to have that partnership. Great question, Steve.
So make sure you drop us your questions as you have them. Councilor Lueb, you want to talk a little bit more about the police levy? We may have some new viewers since our last coverage of this, but I think it's important to make sure that the community knows the challenges that we have around our policing and the fact that we really struggle to respond majority of the time to more than one major incident at a time in the police department. Our officers are working a lot more overtime than I'd like to see them working, and that's to make sure that we're at minimum staffing. When we're running minimum staffing, which is almost half the time in a 24-hour period, that that means that there's oftentimes 3 officers patrolling the entire city of Tigard. I think people are surprised by that when they hear that.
Yeah, we have 5 districts, and there are
Patrol districts.
5 patrol districts, and there are times where, you know, officers are having to cover multiple districts, and when you have a call in one place and you have to rush to a call in the other, it can take a long time to get there. And one of the things that I know as a council we're really concerned about is the time to react to our imminent and immediate calls, our 911 calls where people are in danger and need our police officers there immediately. The average time to get there is right around 6 minutes right now. And
over 6.
It's over 6 minutes now. And it's a really scary situation.
That's to the first unit arriving.
That's really scary if you're in a situation, you know, just a horrible thing to think about, somebody trying to come into your house or a dangerous situation. 6 minutes is a really long time to have to wait for assistance. So that's something that, you know, I'm deeply concerned about, is making sure that our residents, you know, get the help when they need it, when they're calling that 911 for an emergency call.
So the things that we want to add that we've prioritized, and we've cut out a ton of stuff that people wanted to throw into the levy, and the council has tried to be really judicious. I'm actually proud of the work that we've done to keep the levy at a...
It's bare bones.
It is bare bones, both what it adds and the financial components of that. So it adds 8 police officers for patrol, which gives us minimum staffing of 4 officers instead of 3, which means we can handle 2 major calls at a time. It gives us 1 additional school resource officer, which is critical. Right now we have a number of schools that are basically getting no school resource officer support. That was also a recommendation in the performance audit that we had done in the last year. Both the 8 patrol officers and the school resource officer. And then we also, and this is something that I really think is critical in our community, especially with the amount of behavioral health, mental health crises, addiction issues, and other societal challenges that our police officers have become kind of de facto over the last 10 or 15 years, as much of our mental health system has evaporated in our country. They're on the front lines of dealing with mental health crises, and they're not, with their training, without specialized and robust specialized training, they would be the first to admit that they're not particularly well equipped to handle major mental health crises, and yet they're sent to those calls as a first line. And our desire and part of the plan with this levy is to send every single officer in the sworn officer in the Tigard Police Department through what's currently a 40-hour training in advanced crisis intervention and de-escalation training. Critical for our community from my perspective. And over multiple years so far, because of how much time it takes, and remember, when an officer's at 40 hours of training, that means someone else has to be backfilling them. In patrol, we've got a whole 5 of our about 70 sworn staff through that training in like a 4 or 5 year period of time. To me, that is not where our community needs to be at this point.
Yeah, it's really hard for them to do the training, especially as we're talking about the minimum staffing and the backfilling and people being on vacation and different things like that. It's a situation in which we really find it critical and important to support our community. The kinds of calls that our police officers are answering and responding to are very, very different than they were 10 years ago. And a lot of these are those societal calls which need that additional training and the de-escalation. And they just take a long time as well to be able to manage and resolve. And so
they also frequently result in transportation of a person to a hospital. And we don't have a hospital in Tigard, so that means typically St. Vincent's or Meridian Park, both are some distance away, and it typically takes an hour to 2 to hand over care of that individual who's in crisis.
Yeah, and you know, again, when you think about it, that's an hour or 2 during transport and all of that our officer is not able to respond to other calls that may be going on or other things that are needed and necessary. So it's, you know, it's something that I think we feel very passionately about to support our community and support our officers. in order to continue to keep Tigard safe.
So what's it going to cost somebody? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so it's 29 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. Can we talk a little bit about the difference between...
Yeah, which is not what your house is worth.
Yes.
So let's be clear about that.
Yeah, so there's the market value, and then there's the assessed value, which is the amount that you're taxed on, which I believe in Oregon is an average of 57% of your
It's around 60-ish. I don't know the exact percent.
Yeah, I was on a call yesterday and I heard the
you
number
heard
57.
Okay.
So I think it's around 57-60% of your fair market value. And so for the average home in Tigard, it's actually going to be about $81 for the year to add those 8 officers, the patrol, and the additional training, which is something where I think is interesting to point out. A lot of different systems that you may have, your home security systems, your rings, and those sorts of things are actually more expensive for the year than it would be to add additional officers.
So there's also, if you want something more specific, there's a tax calculator on our levy website at the City of Tigard. So if you want a more specific answer to the question of how much it will cost, that is a great place to go get that information.
Yep. So do we want to talk about maybe the performance audit that we went through and kind of the recommendation and how the city came out? So we had a performance audit done in 2019. My dates are starting to merge together. An individual performance audit, which looked at all of the different departments of the city to see how we were running effectively and to come up with suggestions for us to be more efficient or in order to provide better service. And I think the overall theme is that Tigard actually provides an incredible amount of service for the money that the residents are paying. They actually thought that it was above. They were amazed that we were able to do as much as we were.
The auditors were quite surprised, actually.
Yeah, which I think is incredible, and it speaks to the kind of employees that we have here who really care about our residents and our community members and try to do everything possible to make sure that they get the job done. So during that performance audit, we looked at the police department, and the auditor suggested those 8 police officers in order to get that call time for those imminent and immediate dangers down. So this is a number that's coming from an independent source that we were looking for on this levy.
Let's pivot for a moment and talk about the census.
Did you fill yours out?
I did. I even posted it on my Tigard Mayor Jason Snider Facebook page. So I thought it was a great activity to do while I was stuck in my house.
Yep.
And Tigard is actually doing reasonably well at completing the census. I think we have the second best response rate in Washington County. Someone said the state, but I
don't think it's the state.
Well, I think I think it depends on how you decide to evaluate the data.
Oh.
I believe there's a place in Tigard, like one census tract, that may have the second best response rate in the state. But I don't know that we can, in the spirit of being fully transparent, I don't know that we can claim second in the whole state. But we can claim to have the second best census tract in the whole state.
Yeah, it's something that my household filled out. We got the letter in the mail, but we used that code and we filled it out online.
Why is it important?
It's incredibly important. So it does a lot of different things on the federal level. It gives us how many congressional leaders that we are delegated to represent us. It also matters because of the federal funding that's allocated to us as a state and a city. It's based on all of our residents who are here. And so for every person who fills it out, that's additional money that comes into the state and the city that we can use for resources and to give back to the community members for services. So it's really, really important. I know it's something that was a lot of concern, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court about the citizenship question. It's not on the census. It doesn't ask whether or not you're a citizen, and so I know that was scary for a lot of people to be able to give that information out.
The information is also completely confidential and was that was even challenged after the 9/11 attacks and was held as protected. So it's very secure from a confidentiality standpoint.
Yep, and as you said, it was something that was challenged in court and the information wasn't provided. So the census is just something that's really, really important. If by chance you haven't received your information in the mail or it didn't come to you, you can actually still go to the census website and type in your address and answer a couple of questions in order to get there. I know before all of this pandemic was going to happen, there was going to be a couple of different situations in which you'll get a couple of mailings and then someone's going to knock on your door. I don't think there's going to be the door knocking anymore.
Yeah, it'll be different.
It's going to be a little bit different. So please talk to your neighbors from a safe distance, talk on social media, and just encourage everyone to fill out your census. It took me 5 minutes, but it's something that's incredibly important for the state and for the city in order to get those resources.
So the other thing that's important to do is going to be voting.
Which Oregon gets to do by mail.
Coming up soon. Ballots will be out in your mailboxes in about 2 weeks. So be on the lookout for those, and we encourage you to vote. Your city council would ask you to give serious consideration to voting and supporting our police levy. See, we have a last question coming in here from Steve. The city of Portland is off $100 million in lost revenue and laid off 950 people. Is Tiger taking any of those measures into account? And what does your projected revenue loss look like due to COVID-19? And what are you doing to reduce costs? Great question, Steve. And I actually read the information about the city of Portland's $100 million in lost revenue, and they're trying to provide some early projections. I don't think they're super confident in exactly what that's going to look like. We're in the same boat trying to figure out what the impacts are going to be and exactly what action to take. Many of the types of staff that they have laid off are people that we don't even have programs like they have to lay those people off. We'll certainly be continuing to evaluate how long the library closure is going to be. We have taken measures to act on some staff in the city are being furloughed, and that's going to be continuing to be evaluated. But there's also a lot of activity in the city that has to continue. We are obligated by state law to continue processing land use applications. We're obligated by the state to make sure that we have a budget completed by June 30th. So far, the governor has not offered or approved any relief on any of those types of things that are have very specific timing requirements, despite actually a bunch of the mayors asking her to do so. She may take action on that, but the vast majority of the activities that we do are things like making sure people have water, making sure the sewer takes things away from your house that you no longer want in your house,
but not
minus the
flushable
wipes. Making sure that our 911 calls are responded to, processing land use applications, which I should also point out, the funding for those is paid by development. So not only do we have an obligation to do those in a certain time period, but the cost of processing them is borne by the person making the application. And so the library is an opportunity. We are still doing and providing a bunch of services from the library, but that is an area that's under consideration right now for what that should look like depending on how long the COVID-19 situation continues. Any last thoughts? Words of wisdom, Councilor Lueb?
I think you're doing great. I think it's a really, really hard time, and none of us have all of the answers. And as I said earlier, I really I feel for a lot of parents trying to figure out how to juggle working full-time and managing their kids. And I made a joke with my husband earlier today. If you need to cry in the bathroom for 5 minutes, I think that's totally acceptable. It's overwhelming and it's stressful, and it's just something where I think, we can give ourselves a little bit of grace just for the uncertainty of it all. And I think you're doing great.
So last thing I want to do is highlight some of our upcoming council chats just like this one that will be held on Facebook Live. Next one is April 16th at 6 p.m. and would encourage you to tune in for further discussion and answers from your Tigard City Council. You are the reason that we're here, and we want to make sure that we are hearing what you have to say, that we are responsive to our community, and that we make sure that you know why we still have our police levy on the ballot in May.
I just want to add, coming up April 16th at 6 p.m., the one that you're talking about, it's also going to be the Heidi and Jason show, so please come back for more.
Oh, are we both on that
We're going to
night?
be both on again next week, so next week. Excited to see you again. Our next council meeting is not next week, it's the week after.
27th.
The 27th. And we are going to be doing it remote again. And so, which I think actually went really well, Mr. Mayor. I want to say, you know, given the challenges that you discussed of trying to facilitate the meeting, you did a great job. And thanks to Jody for putting the sign on the door so there wasn't a bunch of kids coming in and out. I don't know if you saw my picture.
Our next council meeting is actually the 21st of April.
21st
I'm correcting
of April.
that. So staff corrected me there. Sorry about that. The 21st of April, next council meeting.
Yep. I was just impressed that my cat didn't make more appearances trying to walk across my desk during the meeting.
So
I tried to keep him.
Thank you, Tigard. Good night.
Thank you.